what I believe nowadays is that everybody, under the right circumstances, has the ability to significantly boost their ability, their focus, their drive, their passion, their strength, their fitness. If you provide your body the right environment, the right tools, the right nutrition, and if you live a biologically consistent lifestyle, it's unbelievable the potential that you can reveal and unleash. That's what I'm all about today. Just because evidence is lacking doesn't mean that something is lacking in evidence. What that means is just because we don't have proof that something works doesn't mean that it doesn't work. We don't yet have the proof, doesn't mean that it doesn't work. And then the second thing is every good scientist is skeptical. I identify as a scientist. I like to test things. Here's the real question is, well, what's testing? Because sometimes my testing is intuition. If something intuitively doesn't agree with me, but theoretically or logically or systematic review, whatever says it does, then who's right and who's wrong? Because systematic reviews, they look at a general consensus out of thousands of people and maybe hundreds of studies, but that's not me, right?
All right, everyone. Welcome back to Decentralized Radio. Today we have Andres on the line. How's it going, man? Thanks for joining.
Yeah, it's going great. Thank you guys for having me here.
Ryan, round 2 today, looking beautiful as ever in the cap.
The I did shower yesterday. I tried to be a little ready for today. It's been, you can always tell when I've showered because the hair will poof out a little bit extra. But I'm excited. This will be a good conversation. This is like a month in the making here, so it'll be good.
So you killed off some of those natural pheromones. You're not looking to go out tonight? Nice.
No, dude. I actually went out, funnily enough. I went out with my brother, my girlfriend, and was there anyone else there? There might have been. Can't remember. I went out one night, and I don't drink, so I was just kind of there in the moment. And I have such a hard time staying up late. It's just tough. Yeah. And I don't even get like I feel like most people will hit a threshold where like they're out long enough that they hit an adrenaline rush and they're like, they feel awake again, maybe around midnight. Not me, man. I was dead. I was falling asleep at like every bar we went to. And, not doing that one probably again for a while, but not too much of a night owl. How about you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I used to do a lot of that back in high school. I feel like I got it out of my system pretty early on. In fact, my mom took my fake ID picture when I was like 17.
Wow.
I had the most responsible parents
Same
ever.
here,
Trust
man.
Me,
Same here.
So wait, do those work? I've like never heard of anybody actually having success with those.
So in Miami, it's like basically like it's like a second bar mitzvah, I guess. I mean, I say second because I am Jewish and I did my bar mitzvah, but it's like a ritual. It's like by the time you turn 17 or 18, you better have your fake ID or else you're not really, you haven't actually hit puberty yet. And so over here, I mean, the IDs look fake, but like it's just so common that, and nobody really gives a fuck. They just let you let in. As long as you're paying and, you're having fun or whatever, you're not being an asshole, you'll be fine. By the way, I love how on brand we all are. I just went for a quick jog with my dog, did some grounding on the beach before this. I always do that before every podcast. We've got Tristan with the gym in the background. We've got Ryan with the blue blockers. This is very on brand. I love this. Well, the mountain water right there.
Oh, yeah. We don't mess around. I strategically set up my office in my garage because it's like the only way you can get natural light in without, windows or anything, or just working outside is dope. And I do that at the park every day. But for a podcast setup and multiple screens, it's impossible not to.
The red light. Yeah, no, it's a sweet setup.
But I guess I'm curious. We talked about right then going out. I did the same in high school. I partied a lot, I guess, high school, college, and got it out of my system for sure. It was a similar vibe. But I'm curious, kind of leading into that, because you went to school for kind of like, is it exercise and physiology or just physiology, but definitely more on the movement fitness side of things, right?
Yeah, so I switched majors a bunch of times. I was pre-med track. I did all my pre-med courses, so Calc 2, biochemistry, organic chemistry, all the labs, but I didn't end up pursuing medicine, and we can get into that later. But I switched majors 3 times. So I was originally like pre-med undecided, so I was basically a bio major. Then I think I switched to biomed for like a few months, but I hated it because I suck at physics. I'm great at math, but I suck at physics. Then I switched to, I was on the waiting list for neuroscience because there was like 100 people cap. So I was basically a psych major, didn't want to be a psych major. Then I switched the fourth time to exercise physiology because it was taught, it really closely paralleled pre-med, because we had an incredible professor that really saw exercise and lifestyle as medicine. So it was a really, really strong connection there. And I was all about the lifestyle medicine. So I started to pursue exercise physiology as my major, did psychology as a minor. I was able to start my master's while I was still in undergrad. So I was doing a master's in applied physiology with a concentration in nutrition for health and human performance. So I was like one of two kids in like a class full of PhDs at one point for like a chronic disease prevention class, which was pretty cool. And yeah, I got a chance to do a lot of those credits. Eventually started a master's program. I was a graduate assistant, was on a fully funded research scholarship. I was fucking crushing it. And then, of course, I got crushed by COVID and the pandemic, and I wasn't able to complete that master's degree because the classes just weren't running. I did get really, really far ahead, but didn't get the chance to complete it. And so between now and then, I've been getting most of my education through my podcast, interacting with the world's best in the realms of health, high performance, nutrition, longevity. And now I'm actually about to start my master's in neuroscience with the University of Florida. Yeah, so I'm always learning in and outside of school, love applying. And I think that, taking an N of one approach to health and wellness and then working with other people is an incredible way to learn. Anecdotal for sure, but you get to see the real world application of all this incredible science. And that's what I'm really all about. So yeah, in a nutshell,
That's awesome.
That's my background.
I saw the neuroscience in your bio, and I wasn't sure. I was like, is that new or is that
brand
something
new?
Yeah, so that's what I thought. So that's really cool. And yeah, it's tough navigating academia, I'm sure, but it sounds like you kind of had this, like you wanted to get into, I guess, health or medicine or some field from an early age. Was that installed by the way you were raised? You're always into kind of like working out, fitness.
So had a lot more to do with how I was raised, and then it had something to do with fitness. So, my parents are in the medical field. So my dad's an eye surgeon, my mom's a dentist, and they have, since as far back as I can remember, one of the main conversations in our dinner table every night when we finally got together, they were working every single day. Almost all of our conversations revolved around their story that day of, how they got to help someone and how they helped someone get their vision back, or how they helped somebody smile. They're both doctors in their own way, but it's so interesting because they are the kind of doctors that really get to see, man, how do I put this? Like people like shedding their light. Like, yeah, you can have and I'm not shitting on any other doctor, but it's like a smile, like the eyes, there's such particular areas. There's such intimate areas. And so I don't know, I think having that kind of early exposure, seeing how rewarding it was to apply science to help others, and then also being a scientific, mathematical kind of guy myself, I naturally gravitated towards the medical field. And the more exposure that I got, the more I started to realize that there were certain values that I loved about it, like core values, helping other people, being selfless, being a healer, a provider. But then there were other things that I didn't agree with that resonated with my challenges at the time. So I was medicated almost my whole life for attention deficit disorder. And I started to deal with some pretty nasty side effects. And as I started to do the shadowing for medical school, I start to see a pattern that I didn't like, which was that because the root cause wasn't ultimately addressed, these patients just kept coming back for the same procedure over and over and over and over. I'm talking like second or third liver transplants. Like it was insane. And so I had gained a bit of an interest in neuroscience because I had early exposure through a high school program that I did at a university. And that's where I learned about neuroplasticity, about being able to heal your body through lifestyle. I had access to the gym, the dining hall, social life. I wasn't on medication because it was a summer break. So basically it was the perfect storm of this sort of appreciation for applied science to help others, with my personal journey, with, the perspective of, okay, I can actually help heal my root illness, and as such I don't have to take all these medications that give me these side effects. I can actually help my body level up. And so I started to take the things that I love from my parents and from the medical field, but I started to go in the direction of disease prevention and lifestyle medicine. And that's how things evolved. And of course, uh, getting fit myself for the first time, and really gaining muscle and feeling confident. The way I like to put it, genuinely, I mean, this on the surface level, this kind of sounds funny to say, but I genuinely believe this is what happened. I was able to, through lifestyle change, bring my real genius to life, because my whole life to that point, I had been taking medication that helped me get by. And when you're a young guy, I mean, like, a lot of your identity has to do with how you do in school. Let's face it. And so I knew that I depended on the substance to get by. I didn't think I was very smart. I didn't think I was very capable. And it wasn't until I was able to give my body what it needed to thrive that I realized what I really had inside of me and what I was genuinely capable of. And what I believe nowadays is that everybody, under the right circumstances, has the ability to do that, to significantly boost their ability, their focus, their drive, their passion, their strength, their fitness. I mean, if you provide your body the right environment, the right tools, the right nutrition, and if you live a biologically consistent lifestyle, it's unbelievable the potential that you can reveal and unleash. So that's what I'm all about today.
Man, that's freaking powerful. I'm glad we have someone on the podcast that's a powerful speaker, because it's super engaging. Like, I'm not falling asleep. I'm not like, oh shoot, got to remember, I got to do a question now. Got to do a question. No, that's great. And it's really interesting you bring up ADHD. And so I've been hanging out with this is sort of an aside, but I find it kind of interesting because of your past history dealing with your own sort of illness, which is pretty common in our space. Like, pretty much everyone that's gotten to where they are now had a lot of these struggles, maybe a little bit different, but a lot of them had a lot of the same kind of root cause issues in sort of the way we live our lives in modern society. What I find interesting is, specifically to ADHD and stuff, I've been hanging around with my girlfriend's family quite a bit over the last several days. And, they're a little bit older, kind of group generational. Everyone's together kind of hanging out. And everyone's sort of like these conversations, like a lot of them are revolving around like these medications that they're on, or like, and they're complaining about the system while actively engaging in being dependent on the system. So it's really fascinating. I'm actually quite impressed by how knowledgeable the everyday person is. This is a small scope, but of the medication they take. They say, oh no, you don't want to be on that one. You want to be on this one, XYZ. But none of them really understand like the paradigm outside of what it would be like to not need a medication to thrive, because all of them are on these meds for some sort of ailment, whether it's mental health or otherwise, and they're still not thriving. So that's kind of where I was at a couple of years ago. I mean, I had a bunch of other stuff going on, but I was somebody like you who I actually had undiagnosed ADHD for pretty much until like a couple of years ago. And so I just had these patterns that I just didn't know why I couldn't, like, I was always bouncing around and could never figure out like why my mind could never hyper focus unless it was something I actually gave a shit about. And I actually never really knew how prevalent that issue was until I started talking to my mom this last year. My mom's a first grade teacher, and she was saying, I've never seen so many kids with ADHD diagnoses on Adderall at freaking 6-7 years old, their entire life. And so we live in a society, as you know, that's just like over medicated, undernourished in more ways than just food. And so it's really cool that you've gone through this journey and are now sort of trying to give back on top of that and really instill people's own ability to make themselves the best version of themselves without having to maybe go through something to lean on per se, because I think that's all within us and the resources are there if you're willing to educate yourself. And that's why I think it's cool to have you on the show, because I think you'll be a great resource for people to, at least at the very minimum, feel motivated to like start taking action on your life. But you've done a bunch of stuff outside of just get better and now help other people. What really has been like, was seeing people sick in the workspace what really drove you to like aspire to be the best version of you, to then give back to them? And like, what has driven like all the stuff you've done online? Because I found I'm sort of like you, where I've actually found the best way to learn necessarily wasn't necessarily in the classroom, but it was like having these conversations with people. and talking to people that know more than you do. And so I'd love to like hear your experience, like doing that sort of work and like podcasting and having these conversations and sort of like the enlightenment you felt with that.
Yeah, man. So I'll tell you what, first and foremost, thank you for the recognition. Thank you for the kind words. And I think the conversation that you mentioned alone with, uh, how normal it is to be medicated uh, and look, none of us are doctors. There's always room for that. I think it makes sense in certain cases. And I think, none of this is not medical advice, but it's insane to see how quickly people will gravitate towards medicine, how they'll just completely neglect any root cause or anything in their life. And there's all these levers that we can pull, these physiological levers that we can pull to get our body to return back to its roots. And it's a shame that uh, these medications, these drugs, are just so readily accessible, but the knowledge of our body isn't. I think that's a crime. Anyway, what drives me to have these conversations, honestly, man, one of the biggest things that drives me, I mean, obviously the mission to help other people get their hands on the substance that I wish I had my hands on earlier, that's one. Like every time I have a conversation, I hope that, because I've had a similar conversation like this one many times. Obviously, this is a new perspective, new questions, new dynamic, but it's like it isn't until you say it a certain way that it really clicks for someone. And every time I have a conversation, I hope that I can provide at least one of these gold nuggets of wisdom. It can be a phrase, it can be a word, it can be the way that I say something, the way that you guys ask me something that'll motivate someone to be curious about their body, about their health, and to want to learn more. And so the trajectory that I've seen in my personal professional life through podcasting has been just absolutely incredible. And I think it's because so many people are gaining value from these conversations. And on top of that, public speaking, I mean, even though this isn't necessarily public, but having conversations with people that were older, wiser, I have always been so afraid to do that. And so it's been like an incredible personal growth journey. And at the same time, a growth journey for anybody tuning in. And that is just the most beautiful thing. And now I'm actually looking forward to taking the next step towards something that I'm afraid of, which is public speaking, like getting on stage. It actually, it fires me up to say that, but at the same time, it like terrifies me, but like in a good way, because I see so much growth now in that discomfort. And to that point, I think a lot of people maybe get uncomfortable when you tell them, hey, you know what, there's an answer to getting yourself healthier, to feeling better, that isn't medication, that isn't your Adderall, that isn't pills, it's information. And that may feel uncomfortable because it's the norm, right? To just reach for this and get that instant gratification that you think is helping you, but is destroying you in the long term. I think it's time to learn, man. And I hope that these conversations help inspire people to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same mindset for us. It's so valuable to speak. It's so valuable to have these connections. We do as many in person as we can. Obviously, it's a bit challenging, especially when I live in Wyoming. But, just meeting people and getting their knowledge, sharing that knowledge and spreading it out to your audience is profound, and it can have a profound impact on someone's life. And that's why we're doing what we're doing here. And it's awesome, especially, we're, young man, like similar age, where it can be a challenge and we're trying to break through to this space. And it's awesome. And I love your mindset and pumping people up in general and in your group chats on social media. It's definitely the way. The camaraderie, it can be hard in these spaces, right? Because, you kind of get isolated when you first dive into holistic health or alternative health, whatever you want to call it. You kind of have to take this big jump. And most of your friends you went to high school with, we were talking about high school life earlier, they're not going to be on the same page here. Like they think you're nuts. Your family thinks you're nuts. So it is lonely. So it's awesome to kind of get a little community going. And going back to the ADHD thing, Ryan, you're calling it an issue. I would even debate that it's not even an issue. It's just the modern lifestyle. Yeah. So it's crazy for me because actually in the past 6 months, I've realized that I for sure have whatever you want to call it, that issue, because I just like need to move, like especially in the summertime. I've noticed, and I've got more sun deliberately this summer than ever before. And in the summertime, I just have this do mentality. Like I want to move, I want to physically do things. And I think as a male, obviously that would be very indicative of kind of like ancestrally what we would be doing. And maybe a winter is more slow and more creative, and there's actually neural pathways that some people talk about. There's more dopamine created or backcycled from melanin, like in the winter, which is fascinating. But I'm curious, and my family and girlfriend have visited and told me that they're like, you need to go run around or something. You're a little stir crazy. I'm like, yeah, probably. But I'm curious, Andreas, if that's your perspective too, and kind of how you see that fit into the modern lifestyle, and do you use exercise, challenging exercise and high performance to kind of physically
Yeah.
to quench that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that exercise, and we can dive into all these in depth, but exercise, the right nutrition, good sleep, fasting, uh, and cold exposure have been really good at sensitizing my dopamine centers. And by the way, I think Ryan, I want to give Brian credit here because he did say that he thinks he has ADD, and he noticed that he hyper focuses on things that he really gives a fuck about. That's verbatim.
Well, what's
But
funny about that, just side note, is that all these things were told to me. I never like asked for diagnosis. And so for me, it's like
yeah,
one of those things where it's like, I really hate adding the labels and stuff, but sometimes I don't know how to describe it.
yeah,
But yeah, it's funny because that's a whole nother topic. I'll let you continue there.
yeah. Well, I'll just say, like, I recognize looking back that throughout my whole life, when it came to anything that I genuinely cared about, and the school environment for me was never, ever, ever ideal for learning, ever, or just anything. It wasn't ideal for anything. But and I knew that, so I made my education happen outside of school. And whenever it came to the things that I was genuinely interested in, which at the time and to this day they still are, fishing, video games, um, like anything that I was even remotely interested in, I would just absolutely master like some kind of savant. Like it was so messed up. Um, and I realized, look, I naturally have this hyper focus. Like, let me try to channel this in in a way that can actually, in a more selfless way, because fishing and video games is a very is very selfless. It's pretty selfish, but still fun nonetheless. Anyway, so I started to get interested in the things that actually upregulated my dopamine. And I guess that's like a funny thing there, right? Like the things that I was interested in actually gave me more dopamine naturally, and they can give anyone, they can help just about anyone sensitize their dopamine centers. Um, so yeah, exercise, like the reason why I'm sweating right now and I got some movement before this episode is because I had spent the whole day sitting inside, just kind of doing work that I hadn't caught up on over the weekend, and I just had to move my body, or else I'm telling you guys, I wouldn't be the same person that you guys see on camera. I just would not be in this mood. I wouldn't be in this flow. It just wouldn't happen. So it feels great. Really, really good for the dopamine centers. Um, Fasting has helped me a lot. Going from a fed state to a fasted state. So from a glucose, when you get that glucose to ketone switch, what's called intermittent metabolic switching, you start to see upregulation of BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor for neurogenesis, neuroplasticity, synaptogenesis, and CREB, which is really good for long term memory. And so I genuinely feel the influence of that happening as I fast regularly. Nowadays it's more intuitive. And by the way, for the women that are listening, get to know your female biorhythm. Don't fast like a man. um, and Yeah, obviously the right nutrition. So I know now that gluten, for example, is a huge trigger food of mine. Um, and when I have gluten, I feel tremendous brain fog. I get a little anxious. It just doesn't work. And I don't have celiac. I have a genetic predisposition for it, but it's not active. Um, so, my whole life I had gluten, and I wonder sometimes what would my life have been like if I didn't have any gluten growing up. My parents always, gave us access. We always had access to healthy food. My parents are doctors. They don't know any better than to give us, whatever to just get ready to go to school. And they weren't monitoring what I'm eating in school. when I was actually on the meds, I was surviving off of like Ensure shakes, which are trash. Like I didn't have the appetite for anything else. So anyway, whole food, nutrient dense foods, sleep. I was jacked up on amphetamines, didn't get sleep. So the theme here is I start to add back in all the things that I had basically turned down because I was jacked up on amphetamines. And isn't that like that's such a particular thing, right? Um, yeah, my brain started to do things that I never thought it could. I started to accomplish things that I could never imagine were possible. And it all goes down to, well, I gave my brain what it needed to naturally get its dopamine into, and I just continued to narrow down that focus. And I got more of that positive reinforcement as it became more sensitive to it. And it just became, as you can tell, an obsession. Yeah, I'm here to tell a tale. And I'd say, I'll tell you what, you asked me about my credibility early on in this episode. I would say where I'm most credible, and this comes from the heart, is that because I went through that journey, like maybe I have the knowledge and I'm always looking for more knowledge, but because I went through that journey, I can genuinely empathize with the folks that want to get there. Like when I work with my clients, I don't just tell them, oh, look, here's your data, here's your blood. I'm going to, look at it with my medical board and we're going to determine, like, okay, yeah, like logically that makes sense, but I really can feel for them. I can put myself in their shoes because I have been there. I was there for over a decade of my life. So I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to be totally out of touch with your body and to just kind of go through the motions of life and cross your fingers and hope for the best. Like it sucks. When you finally feel what it's like to thrive, it's insane. You quite literally feel like you're an alien on Earth. And I think everyone deserves to experience that at least once. And trust me, if you experience it once, you're going to want to feel like that every single day of your life, period. So let's do whatever it takes to get you there.
No, I couldn't have actually said it any better. It's really interesting too, because it's like, it's sort of like a retrospective once you see a lot of progress and you look back and you're sort of like, oh man, if I had known when I was X amount of years old, if I had known this one concept, my life would have been like completely different. But at the same time, it's like, and this is something I've actually had a really, really difficult time with as I've really started doing a lot of the mindset work with like, been doing EMDR with my therapist and like all this sort of like, trying to unseat rooted traumas that I think were a lot of triggers for a lot of the susceptibilities that came to be for me in my late teens. It's really, you have to be like okay with the fact that you weren't okay at a point in earlier time, and then sort of, because in that you never would have turned out the way you did. You would have never discovered like half the things you've learned if you didn't go through all that shit, right? So I've actually become very grateful for like all the struggles I've had to go through. Like for me, like a little background on my story, like everyone already knows this, so I won't stay on very long, but I had anorexia when I was 18 for like about 2 years. I was like 80 pounds or something. And like that destroyed a bunch of stuff. But I really beat myself up for a long time because of that. I was like, oh man, if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be dealing with like that problem now that I got to work on and this problem. But at the same time, I probably would have never ventured into any of this alt health stuff or met any of you guys had I not gone through those years of my life. So I've actually become thankful for those. And I was even telling my girlfriend the other day, I was like, I actually wouldn't go back and change anything, even though I deal with some stuff now that I'm still working on. Cause like the amount of knowledge that I have now at 27 is invaluable. I would have been, and I still have lots to learn. Don't get me wrong. I'm hardly wise, but I would be so much further back. Probably would have been in a desk job right now. I'd probably be still at work till about 6, come home, probably hate my life. And that'd probably be like my day. So you sort of have to be happy for the experiences you've had. And like you said, what's really cool about going through that and then working with people, and I've had this experience working with people myself, is you can meet them on their level, which is really what they want and what they can't get out of the centralized like medical system usually. Because the doctor usually can't necessarily relate to the patient dealing with a struggle, especially if you're going to like a GP or something like that. They see so many people. And usually they've never had all the ailments, obviously, that their patients deal with. So it's almost impossible for them, to no fault of their own, to meet them on their level when they got to see another patient in 30 minutes. So it's really valuable on this end to have had those instances, and you can really get that one-on-one with somebody, and it's a really cool experience. I think it's something that you can only ever really feel if, like yourself, have worked with somebody else that has been through what you've gone through on some level. It's really cool. I'm sure you felt that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And if we all, the three of us, have a hero's journey, right, that we can tell now and reflect back on deeply. And you're absolutely right. Like if I hadn't done this or gone through this experience, I was, and by the way, I got to the point where I was really fed up, and it was super ugly. I got really depressed, really sick. Like it was a very dark period of my life when I finally decided to just flip the switch. Very, very, very dark period. But I honestly believe that if I hadn't gone through that, and if I had stuck through and become a doctor, dude, I honestly, and this, call it controversial, call it whatever, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm just going to say it. I think I would have I don't think it would have ended well at all. Like I don't think I would have helped anybody, because I wouldn't have known how to help myself. And if I was just giving out drugs and, whatever, because the system or insurance or whatever, like I don't think I would have done a good job. I don't think I would have been happy. And I'm holding back on uglier things that I can say, but yeah, I admire everyone in the medical field who does that. And I work with people now that are doctors who have a mindset that is unbelievable, and they bring in functional and integrative and all that. And I'm not shitting on the doctors who don't, but I believe, for me personally, with my history, my health, what I went through, what I saw, it would have gone against everything that I believed in, and I would have been very unhappy.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to look back at that, because it's, well, first off, everything happens for a reason, and we all kind of embody that, right? Like we've gone through struggles, and it's kind of the inflection point of our lives, and it had to do with health, and we were meant to go deeper into the health rabbit hole and learn about it, and then share that knowledge with others, because obviously your body was telling you innately that that was not the path for you, right? So you can look back and realize that, but in the moment, yeah, that's scary, and you don't know where your life's gonna head. So it's really powerful, that kind of mindset. But I'm curious, tying this into, your parents are, I guess, maybe traditional doctors, and you're working with doctors, and you're talking about the issues with centralized healthcare. Where and what are the principles of what you do today, and what are your thoughts on, I guess, the system as a whole, the healthcare system? Do you see a shift? You're mentioning, more integrative functional measures. Do you see a positive shift occurring? And how do you see this kind of playing out in terms of progression going forward?
That's a great question, man. It's a loaded question, but what I'll start with is, I totally, absolutely see, what do you want to call it? Western medicine or standard medicine, modern medicine. I see that we're always going to need that. I will always value that. It's critical. We need to have that. Um, I think more people are starting to wake up, both patients and doctors, to the idea that there's more to health than medication. And then, in fact, you should look at your lifestyle. You should look at your decisions. You should look at your thoughts. You should look at your relationships, your environment, and how they influence uh, your state, your well-being. Um, as far as the principles that I tie in, I mean, you guys know that I'm really in on the lifestyle medicine. I think that because we live in such a modern world, we have to make the effort, which otherwise we wouldn't have to make. But in this modern world, we have to make the effort to return to a biologically consistent lifestyle. So what that means is, what happens when the sun goes down nowadays. And in nature, when the sun goes down and it intersects more of the atmosphere, and as such, we filter more blue light, it gets, the sky gets red, and we start to accumulate melatonin. Nowadays, sun goes down, we turn on the lights, we go on our phones. So we're not accumulating melatonin. So we don't have that 1/3 of our life, sleep, that makes it 2/3 the best that it can be. That's one example. We're not moving our body, so our body becomes inflamed. It becomes slow. It becomes um, tired, sick. Uh, we start to lose muscle, gain fat. Uh, there's XYZ example. There's so many different examples. I'm all about returning to the lifestyle that's biologically consistent in the modern day. So some people call that biohacking. Some people call it integrative health. I just think it's knowing your physiology, which is the name of my brand. I think if you know your physiology, you'll know what you need to do to pull those levers and unleash your body's potential. Um, and look, I'll tell you what, the doctors that I work with nowadays, they get it. They have always been selfless people. They went into medicine for what I believe are the right reasons. They really did it to help others, and they are willing to learn and do whatever it takes to get people the help that they need. So I've worked with doctors that, what they say and what they do, that's just how it is. And then I've worked with doctors that are very open-minded and they collaborate with other specialists to give their patients access to all kinds of medicine, from the Western modern medicine to psychedelic medicine to lifestyle medicine to nutrition and functional medicine, you name it, to yoga and mindfulness, everything. And those are the doctors that I like to work with. Nothing wrong with the rest, but that's what I believe and that's what I like to work with. So like I said, I do see people waking up to this. I see the medical field transforming, but again, with every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I'm sure there's people that are now further away from holistic health now more than ever before, right? So we're in a space where we love what we do. We believe in what we do. Like you said, in the beginning, when you're first getting into this field, it may feel isolated. You may feel isolated from your people that you grew up with. But all of a sudden you start to find this community of people that believe and do the same or similar things. And I think that that's true for a lot of the medical field as well. A lot of these doctors that were traditional doctors and started moving the direction of more integrative medicine. Maybe in the beginning they were more isolated, but now I definitely see this sort of coming together. I see social media as being a platform that facilitates that movement to a certain degree. However, I think that one of the biggest threats to this movement is that on social media, everyone's so busy calling everybody else out. That's a whole other thing that we can talk about. But I think it's always going to come down to collaboration, to educating the patient or the client and helping them harness the intuition so that the doctor isn't necessarily like a dictator, but like a leader in their health journey that gives them access to all the tools that they need. So I hope that was a way, I hope that was a good answer to your question in a way that really encapsulates everything that I believe.
I thought that was pretty good. I mean, in my mind, it's sort of, and this is just sort of the consensus I've come to on my own, as well as talking to other people, is that no matter what, the effort to change the system, which I don't think will ever be changed in the way that I would like, is going to need to be a patient-led effort, because it's just the way it is. Like I have conversations like this with people that just message me on Instagram and they're like, oh, I got this thing. Like, what do I do about this thing? Like, what doctor do I see? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, at the end of the day, it's like, you may need to see somebody or whatever, but you're still going to do like probably 90% of the heavy lifting, like on your own, to try and figure that out. And there's almost no way around that. Like I've learned from lots of different mentors and gurus or whatever you want to call them online. I kind of want to get into the infighting because that sounds fun. But most of what I've learned, I had to seek out myself, and it's about being innately curious. And I feel like just people, you're either curious or you're not. You're either driven to curiosity through pain and suffering, or you're innately that way, or you're somebody that doesn't want to deal with that. And so you accept what you think is inevitable, which is like lifetime of polypharmacy, multiple medications, like all this stuff. You kind of go either way. You kind of meet a fork in the road. And I think everyone gets there at some point in life. Some find it sooner than other people. They reach that fork. But what I think is bright is that, I've spoken to a lot of doctors in the space, particularly younger doctors, but even some older ones that as long as they're not set in their ways per se, seem to be pretty open-minded to always learning, always taking in new information. I think on a higher level, what would be great for practitioners in a conventional setting would be being more open-minded to things that don't necessarily come out of a peer-reviewed 1,000 placebo-blinded study or whatever, and just like look at logical things. I feel like we don't. I feel like there's so much like logical stuff just like happening in the medical space that it would behoove people to just like use common sense and not just like, listen to like what big pharma is trying to sell a drug for. But it's super nuanced. So it's like there's not black and white. And what I want to get to is like within the community itself, I see the same problems in the functional health space, which I actually don't even like that term anymore. But the same problems happen in the functional health space, but it's just usually with like supplements and all these protocols and all these different diets and stuff. And then you get the same issue where it's like people are now in camps within the health space where they're anti whatever allopathic medicine, but they're like super stuck in their ways of like, this is the only way health can thrive, is like, you got to be vegan or whatever. You got to get into the diet camps. And even within that, there's a myopic perspective that I think people would be good to like look outside of themselves for a little bit. But I think that's just sort of the nature of being human, is you find sort of tribes and you sort of settle in that. And then you find out that something doesn't work exactly like you were told it was going to work. And then you're like, oh, your mind's open again and you look for other stuff. So I'd sort of love your opinions on like, how do you remain open-minded to new concepts and ideas and not get into that path of like getting stuck again? Because I find that that's a very easy thing to do for people on the way. Because I'm one of those people where like I've never accepted that anything has to be inherently that way for sure. I'm always open to being wrong. And I think that that's something that the community in general needs more of.
I'll tell you what, you asked a great question. And before I get into my complete answer, I'll share with you 2 nuggets of wisdom that my professor, my biggest inspiration, professor from the University of Miami, shared with me many years ago. The first one is that just because evidence is lacking doesn't mean that something is lacking in evidence. So what that means is just because we don't have proof that something works doesn't mean that it doesn't work. We don't yet have the proof, doesn't mean that it doesn't work. And then the second thing is every good scientist is skeptical. I identify as a scientist. I like to test things. And here's the real question is, well, what's testing? Because sometimes my testing is intuition. If something intuitively doesn't agree with me, but like theoretically or logically or systematic review, whatever says it does, well, then who's right and who's wrong? Because systematic reviews, they look at a general consensus out of thousands of people and maybe hundreds of studies, but that's not me, right? So I think that, man, there is no perfect answer to this question, at least not that I have one. I don't have a perfect answer to the question. I would say that the tribe that I like to surround myself with, and maybe I'll regret saying this 5 years from now, but I like to surround myself with people that question but aren't necessarily conspiracy theorists, just people that ask questions, people that are curious. That's what I like to surround myself with. If you're curious, then whether something's right or wrong, you're still going to ask why. And I think that question of asking why, that's my biggest question. That's the number one question, will eventually lead me to either some mechanism of action or some kind of intuition. And that typically is enough for me to feel good about the decision that I'm making. And look, I'm sure that 5 to 10 years from now, I'll reflect back on some of the things that I do nowadays, and maybe I will regret it. But I know that I am still going to test, whether it's through reviews or my own intuition, to figure out what's right for me. And hopefully one day I'll have the perfect answer to your question. But for now, asking why is good enough for me.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why I think we align like pretty well in mindset, is because that's really what it comes down to. And the more you learn, the more you realize that we don't know. And yeah, the more you look at studies, the more you realize that more and more are very questionable, but they have nuggets of information that can be extremely valuable for you to put together your hypothesis for what's most optimal for your environment. But I mean, let's be real. And that's why I love that you're saying, you're testing or you're collecting N of 1 data, And then Ryan and I were talking earlier today about that. Like, I'm going to do some, experimental lab tests, compare summer versus winter, and, completely just embrace seasonality, which is pretty profound up here in Wyoming compared to where you are in Miami, and get it out there. Because guess what? There's no information for healthy 20-something-year-old men like us who are really embracing like a seasonal, ancestral, whatever you want to call it. You call it biologically consistent. I really like that, because that's not putting you in any camp, and it is biologically unique, right? We're totally different, genetic background, geography, where we live. So it is going to be different, and we shouldn't do the same thing. I mean, maybe part of the year, maybe like, obviously value sleep, movement, things like that. But I think that's what's really important. But it doesn't fit well with the narrative of anyone's mindset, because people just want to be told what to do and what's like an easy thing. And that's why you see people go from strict veganism to strict carnivore, because they're like, all right, this is just like really simple, and I can just do this and I'll be healthy. And then, depending where they live, what their activity level is, they might not be healthy for that long. So I'm curious, what are your like principles of, or pillars of health, just at a high level? Like what's like a day in the life for you, and how do you balance that biologically consistent living and the modern lifestyle? Because to me, that's like the biggest challenge. Obviously, we can't just go back to living in the woods, although I might if things really hit the fan. But but seriously, it's the biggest struggle, and we want to continue to progress as a society. So I'm curious how your mindset has evolved around this, and are there things now that you value more than maybe 2 years ago, like for example?
Yeah, great question and great preface to it. And I will say that, over the years, I've been exposed to a lot, especially because uh, I do a lot of work on social media. And so I see all these trends come and go, and influencers come and go. I've been on social media now for like 5 or 6 years, and that's not the ideal place to learn anything, but you get to see how people think and how their ways of thinking evolve. And so I think it's a way to, I think it's like you get a lot of exposure to a lot of different ideas. Um, I would say that right now, my biggest foundations are the following, and they are in order in terms of, I guess you can call them, not necessarily priority, but I'll just lay them out for you. You guys can help me find the best word. So number one is sleep. I'm very, very big on sleep. I think that everybody tuning in right now can sleep at least 10% better, more efficiently, waking up less throughout the night, feeling refreshed, recovered in the mornings, ready for the day. I think everybody can improve their sleep. And if you think about it, it's 1/3 of our life. Like if your life expectancy is 75 years, that's 25 years of sleep. Sleep is the best opportunity that you have for your body to orchestrate a series of biological processes that help you repair, remember, refine, recover. And it does this intelligently. Like you're giving your body the opportunity to orchestrate functions that it intelligently, that it has the wisdom to do. So if you can improve that recovery process, you're improving automatically your quality of life. And when you have an improved quality of life, when you have a regulated nervous system, when you feel refreshed, recovered, energized, automatically all these other pillars that I'm about to mention, they're so much easier to accomplish and to do right. So for example, the next pillar is nutrition. If you're sleeping better, you have a regulated nervous system, you're going to make better decisions about what you eat. And you're probably going to consume less calories throughout the day, because you're not going to be eating from an emotionally driven, hyper like stress, chronic stress state, right? You're going to be pretty intuitive. You're going to be a little more mindful about what you're eating. You're going to chew a little more slowly, increasing the surface area of food. You're going to opt for foods that are actually nutrient dense rather than the foods that appear, that trick your mind, exploit the reward mechanisms of your brain to give you the impression that they're more nutrient dense. So like colored foods, processed foods, highly palatable foods, like your brain will choose that instant gratification when it's under this stress state and it just wants something, right? So you're bringing more consciousness and awareness automatically to your life and more energy to your life. So all of a sudden nutrition is better. So sleep and nutrition, great. Now you have the fuel and you have the energy, and you're in the state of mind where it's a lot easier to move your body. So movement is the next pillar, right? And all of a sudden you can go hard, you can recover from it, you can feel your body to go hard, and you can get into that hormetic state where your body becomes stronger, faster, fitter, etc. And then if you got your sleep right, you got your nutrition right, you got your movement right, your mind is going to be in a pretty good place. So like if you take care of those three things, your mind is going to be awesome. You're going to feel great. You're going to be happy. You're going to have more sensitive dopamine centers, more serotonin. You're going to feel great. And so obviously, there's certain things in each one. The bulk of each of these pillars, if you think about it, you can do a lot in this modern day that gives you what you would have otherwise gotten in ancient times. So if you look at sleep, all right, what are the three best things that I believe you can do? Make your environment as dark as possible earlier in the day. Try to match it to sun exposure and whatever the sun's doing, wherever you are in the world. Making it cool. So as the sun goes down, less heat, cooler. A decline in your core body temperature is actually what actually initiates sleep. So yeah, melatonin accumulation gets you sleepy. There's a bunch of other things that drive the need for sleep, but what actually initiates sleep is a decline in your core body temperature. So it's another thing. And then what can you do to sort of biohack this, right? Where wearing blue blockers helps, not using your phone in bed because you're not supposed to get that kind of effect in bed. And also not just using the phone, but bringing any kind of responsibility into the sleep environment is going to put you in a more sympathetic state. It's going to take away from the drive for sleep. And nutrition, right? Like if you're eating organic foods, whole foods, like that is biologically consistent. No matter what you're eating, whether you're vegan or carnivore, whole food, you're going to be better, period. You're going to be more satiated. You're going to have a higher thermic effect. Food's going to have a higher thermic effect. So you're burning more calories digesting the food, which contributes to your resting energy expenditure. So you're less likely to overconsume calories. For movement, if you got those two things, those two pillars out of the way, you will move more, period. You're going to move more. You're going to walk more. You're going to feel more motivated to take the bike to work rather than the Uber. There's so many other examples, right? And then your mind, again, you do these things, you're going to feel great. You're going to be in a good, happy mindset. But then there's ways to biohack it. Like I found, for example, that my mind thrives when I'm getting a good amount of choline in my diet. Alpha GPC, I supplement alpha GPC. I will consume probiotic rich foods for the serotonin production. There's a bunch of different things that I take that really get my mind in a good place, because even if you do everything possible to live that biologically consistent lifestyle, the modern day always had this way of polluting you to some capacity. And so you have to find clever ways to do what you can. And it's fun. It becomes like a game, and you can actually quantify this. So like I used to do a lot of data tracking. So I have, right now I'm wearing a Whoop and a Garmin, but they're actually both dead. I just went for a walk and I have to sometimes look the part in case I run into whatever. But I'm actually not using data right now because I think data is a good backbone. I think it's an amazing backbone that incentivizes the right changes and behaviors and systems in your life to get you healthier. But I'm now in a place where I am trying to harness more of that intuition. I feel like I've harnessed a lot of intuition. And so I can just wake up in the morning. I can probably guess within a small degree of variance where my HRV and recovery scores are at. I can kind of feel my body and I know what kind of movement I should do, what I should be eating. And I like kind of doing that now. So I used to look at data, and I used to make this sort of like a game. And I used to try to measure, exactly how much of these inputs I needed to get the perfect hormetic stress. Like I used to be crazy with that. I use it from time to time now, but intuition for me goes a long way. And when you get to know your physiology, which is the name of my mission, again, know your physio, you realize that there's so many little clever ways, like little things that add up to have a massive impact on your quality of life. Like just the blue blocking alone, like an amber pair of blue blocking glasses, not the clear ones, but an amber, like that puts you to sleep. And by the way, I've mentioned this on several podcasts, and it's always a pleasant surprise for folks that aren't aware of this, but we're so rooted in positive reinforcement to the degree where wearing blue blockers in the beginning, all you really get is well, you block the wavelength of light that inhibits melatonin production. But over time, you actually classically condition yourself. The glasses become the conditioned stimulus. And so when you put them on, your body knows you're getting ready to go to bed, and you start to, get even sleepier. So nowadays I put on my raw optics, and within 5 to 10 minutes, I'm like just knocking the fuck out. It's incredible. And you could do this with so many different items and so many different hacks, so I have fun doing it. I think just about everyone can have fun doing it. And yeah, those are my 4 pillars. Everything else, man, right now in my life, it's pretty simple. I try to keep things very simple. I start with the complex. I've tested almost everything out. I've had all kinds of companies send me all their equipment and their hacks and their supplements and whatever. And I think it's cool. But now I'm at the point where I think a lot of that is gimmicky. I think most of what it takes to feel good, it's free and it's already in your life. You just have to know how and when to use it.
No, I couldn't agree more. It's actually funny you mentioned, because I have my red ones right here. It's actually really funny you mentioned that happens with the blue blockers and getting like tired almost immediately, because that's literally what happens to me. Like, even if it's a later than normal, like I got back later than normal last night and I had my yellow ones on, but the red one, I was out like nothing, like 10 minutes. And it's really funny how your physiology is kind of like gets into rhythms, and like everyone I think innately kind of knows that, because like for me, like I was never a breakfast person like pretty much my whole life until I started like eating breakfast or whatever. We can debate like if you need breakfast or whatever, context dependent. I don't always eat breakfast, but like it, when I was trying to, sounds dumb because I'm actually not bulky now. I've never really successfully bulked, to be honest with any of you, but there was a time in my life where I was trying to bulk. So I started eating breakfast, and I was like, oh man, this is going to suck, because like I never eat breakfast. I'm never hungry in the morning. I just started doing it, and then your body just like craves it after a point, because you set a new cycle for yourself. So your body is like really, really like fluid. And like they're even saying that now with like neuroplasticity, like you can actually change like your brain like a lot more than people thought. Like they used to think that it was like dead set. I'm sure this stuff that you dive into all the time. But it's super fascinating that you were talking about like as you've practiced things, tracking data had its merits, and it still does for certain goals. And I ask people this all the time. It's like, why are you tracking that? Or like, why are you worried about this? Because I found after a point of me tracking things, it was actually me being so hyper focused on it that it gave me anxiety to like look at my aura numbers in the morning. And after a point, it's like you just get so in tune with your body. Like, you know, if you got good deep sleep and good REM, because you don't feel like crap. And once you get to that, I think that's such a beautiful place to be, because that's when you're so you're so in tune with your own physiology. It's like so many people aren't. So that's why I think like there is like value to tracking, and like obviously performance and stuff like that. It's good to track stuff because like you're trying to achieve specific goals. I think that's valuable for everyone, but the best place to be is like when everything's just like clockwork. And like Tristan will attest to this too, is like the longer you've been in the space and the more you've done, it seems like the simpler things actually get for you. Like you're taking less supplements, and it's just like the everyday stuff of like getting up, seeing morning sunlight, touching dirt and stuff. It's like these little things that add up, but it's not, I'm not like, I don't have any like crazy, like probably the craziest thing I have is I have a red light over there that I use sometimes, but that's like probably the craziest like biohacking thing I've ever had. But yeah, that's like simplicity is everything at the end of the day. And it's sort of like not getting lost in the noise. And I'll kind of let Tristan chime in on this because I know he has something he wants to say. But
well,
it's
just in
simplicity.
general, it's fascinating, right? Because we've all been in this space for at least a few years, and now we've arrived at this point. Why is that the case? Because we've tried a lot of this shit. And what moves the needle the most is foundational lifestyle habits that are free or no added cost. I mean, you can make the argument that like eating higher quality foods is slightly higher cost, but going outside, moving, I mean, a pair of blue light blocking glasses, you don't even have to buy that. I don't even use them in the summer. I straight up just don't. I don't even turn on the lights. In the winter, obviously it gets dark at like 4:00. I'm going to have to use some more protection. But yeah, it's really easy, I think, when you first get in this space to be attracted to this glamour that is pills, supplements, gadgets. I mean, it's cool stuff. It's like, wow, like, you know, some of these devices can, you know, reconfigure your brain waves, or, you know, put you in a more parasympathetic state, or, you know, there's all these crazy things out there. And yeah, it's fascinating. And technology has its place, probably more so for, you know, extreme cases and a short period of time. But what's going to move the needle the most for like your everyday long-term health is, yeah, they're mostly free. So I'm curious. I'm assuming, obviously you've thought the same things, but do you notice that being like a trend in general, or do you think that's just what happens after you've been in the space for like 4 or 5 years?
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked that question for my
I
own
don't know
sake,
the
because
answer.
I wanted to actually make the transition to that point, and so you asked the perfect question. And I would say, um, yeah, I mean, all these free things that are already in our lives, uh, what do they have in common is that they're easy to adhere to once you understand that they actually do have a profound effect. And when you understand that what has the most profound effect is consistency. And if you have the most, like I'll give you an example. When I was tracking my data and I was absolutely obsessed, sometimes I wouldn't charge it like before bed. And so I would literally stay up charging this fucking device. Like, it's so stupid. So
Mental.
that's just one example of like what are you doing? You know, just get good sleep, wake up, be a little more intuitive. Um and all of these, you know, yeah, a lot of these things are free to do. Now, all right, so to answer your question, I do think a lot of people, because they already are sort of used to this instant gratification, let's say, let's face it, just our phones and notification online, like it just kind of puts you in that mindset. And so it's almost inevitable. But when you're already in that mindset and then you look at health, because let's say, I don't know, inevitably again, you've brought yourself to a disease state or just a poor mental health state. Now you want the same thing. You want health, but you want instant gratification health. And so all these brilliant marketing tools and campaigns, they lure you in the direction that, all right, you want health? All right, you got to buy this product. You got to buy the supplement. You know, they're feeding off of people that are in a way desperate. So I think that, look, maybe that'll lure you in, but eventually what you'll learn is that in fact, the free lifestyle changes that you can make, and sometimes they have a small cost, right? Like eating healthier food. Let's just face it, it's not necessarily more expensive. It's that the other food that you're eating is just really cheap. Um, you know, and I know a lot of people that eat cheap food, but then they go out every night, they spend $100 on drinks and getting into the club, right? So it's just a matter of the way that you think about this. It's a matter of priority. It's a matter of delaying gratification. And sure, maybe you'll go into this for because it looks sexy and it looks gimmicky, but I think a lot of people do. And by the way, I hope not only do they, but I hope that everyone ends up believing in the systems and in the lifestyle change. So look, I've worked with everything from World Series of Poker finalists that win $4 million payouts for playing poker, to a billionaire board member of Airbnb, to the number 5 female tennis player in the world and the best Canadian tennis player of all time, to Le Mans second place race car. I mean, I've worked with all kinds of high performers, and these high performers, they approach me for the data, for the gimmicks, for the hacks. You know, oh, I want to improve by my HRV by 10%. Like, dude, no, you don't. You just want to wake up feeling more refreshed and more recovered. You want to be a little sharper when you're racing your car. So anyway, a lot of people do come for those reasons, and look, I honor that. I love that. Get curious. But if you're here because you think that instant gratification, which is the root of evil in a lot of ways, is going to help you get healthier, you're wrong. So come on in, but I'm going to show you real gratification, genuine long-term satisfaction and fulfillment. All right? So I'm going to hold your hand and we'll do it together. So hopefully, hope if there's anything that I said that's valuable in this podcast, I hope that that's it. Because instant gratification is just the absolute biggest killer. And by the way, this wasn't part of the question, but I do want to, if I can, I want to take you guys through my phone settings to mitigate the effects of instant gratification and you know, just having a better relationship and more intentional use of my phone. So maybe we can at some point transition there.
That sounds cool. Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's the biggest issue for a lot of us, I would say.
Yeah.
But It's so true. I know we want to get to some other things as well, but like it's all that glamour that really does draw people in, and it's fascinating to think about the high performers because they just they think it's too simple to be that effective, actually. I probably.
Yeah,
And they think they're missing
very well
out on
said.
something, and they need to be doing stem cells or whatever, crazy thing. But in general, 99.9% of people they're not doing the fundamentals well enough. They might be doing them, like they might be going to sleep at a certain time, but like they're not doing the fundamentals well enough. And if they just did those like 40%, I don't know, you could call it more strict, but more biologically consistent is probably better, then they get more of a profound effect. So I'm glad you shared that,
Genuinely, yeah.
because I think it's underrated. And especially people are always looking to the really high performers for like what the hell they're doing that's like super crazy or out there, when if you just lived in accordance with your biology and nature a bit more, you'd probably be just better off.
Yeah, yeah, for real.
But with that, personal responsibility, one thing that I love that you do is spearfishing / harvesting your own food.
Yeah.
It's something to me as I've gotten into hunting the past year and a half, and it's coming up now season. Really
What,
stoked
elk
about it.
season?
Yeah, elk, just in general, hunting
Oh
season.
man,
Yeah,
that's on my bucket list, man. Bow hunting and elk is like top tier bucket list. And
I
it's, yeah, go for
just
it.
got a bow.
Oh, dude.
But who knows? But it's probably too early for a bow this year. But that's, I got an elk last year. I was super stoked. First ever hunting trip. But that kind of personal responsibility of harvesting your own food is really, to me, one of the most admirable things you could do. But then the spear fishing, free diving that you do, that's like, it's so badass to me as well, because you're literally underwater. And, we've talked to folks like Erwin LaCour's talking about breath hold work and how free divers and spear fishermen, you have this insane ability to go underwater, control that sympathetic response. And it's actually so great for your health, of course, being able to deal with that from a nervous system perspective. But then at the same time, you're also, having to control, your brain to be able to accurately shoot a target, and swimming underwater, cold water. I don't know the water temperature there. Maybe it's warm, but walk us through that. Is that something you always have done? How did you get into this? And like, what's it all about? Because I love it.
If you can't tell by the smile on my face, I love spearfishing. and I'll tell you what, shooting fish and bringing it home, making a nice dinner, that's obviously a huge bonus. But most of the benefit and the reason why I love it is because of the adventure and the sense of camaraderie and how primitive it is to be among other people that are driven on this pursuit to like hunt. It's like, if you want to talk about evolutionarily preserved mechanisms, like being a hunter and a gatherer, it's in every single one of us. Whether you gather plants and all you eat is plants, or you shoot elk every season, like it's inside of you. And if you can find the format that allows you to reveal and unleash that, you're going to be even more human. And so I have had the chance to experience every single emotion spearfishing. Most of that is joy and pleasure. And also very difficult times, and ending up in the emergency room for 2 or 3 days and in the hospital under close observation because I had a lung trauma, harvesting a grouper 70 feet deep on one breath, and spending 3 years paying that off. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And like you said, sometimes when I tell people about spearfishing, I don't consider some of the things that you mentioned, which is, not only do you have to be aware of the environment, but in being aware, you have to be calm, and then you have to line up a shot, right? And it's like like it's millimeters and milliseconds that make the difference, and I think that it's an environment and a way of life where I get to take everything that I know to the extreme. And I love that. I love seeing how far my applied breathwork techniques can go, not only in helping me prepare to dive down deep, but to, what am I doing on the boat between dives so that I don't spend all my energy on the first couple spots, because we're out there sometimes the entire day doing 100 dives, between 30 and 80 feet deep, hunting fish. So it's the most intense. And then, by the way, you have to get back, clean the fish, carry all the gear, go back home, clean everything up. It's like, it's exhausting. You're doing endurance work, you're doing strength and power, you're holding your breath. There's not a lot of science behind, like, in every sport above, on land, you can, be, I guess, a little more intuitive about your breathing because you're not holding your breath. Like when you're holding your breath, it just adds a whole nother layer of complexity to everything. But I'll tell you what, and this is going to sound cheesy, and it's something that many freedivers and spearfishermen will say, when you can really harness that awareness with your body, calm yourself down, and be, get into that flow state where nothing else matters and you're totally present, you actually forget to breathe. And it's when you're deep in that water and you're so calm, you did everything right, you're so calm, that's when the surrounding life gets curious and approaches you. So like, as a good hunter, and by the way, this is true to underwater hunting as much as it is for hunting elk, on a mountain. It's like when you're super calm, when you're super relaxed, you're a part of that ecosystem and life approaches you. And that is something that is, there's no words to express how beautiful and how rewarding that is. And then, hey, if you so choose, take a shot, bring that animal home and tell the story of how it all came together among people that you love and enjoy that amazing food that the universe, God, whatever you pray to or whatever you believe in, provided you with. So I live for those moments, man. I live for those moments. And, you can say, all right, well, yeah, you're traveling all over the world, raising your carbon footprint, going on planes to hunt this one fish as a trophy and putting it on Instagram, like whatever, like people are always going to complain. Yeah, I burn fossil fuels to get to Panama to hunt a big snapper, but it's not about that. It's not about taking a good picture for Instagram. It's about having a sense of adventure in this modern day where, let's face it, like most of our adventure is waking up and going to work. And like, I want to feel human. And I'm sorry that that's what it takes to feel human nowadays. Get upset about it all you want. I'm here living life and enjoying that with so many people that I love. So I'm going to keep doing it. And yeah, man, there's nothing like spearfishing. There's nothing like hunting. But I think it always has to have that kind of sense of love, awareness, and appreciation for your environment, whether you kill something or not.
That's cool, man. That's rad. I'm like hyped off that already. It's funny because it's like I've never personally like hunted anything. That's a lie. Never legally hunted anything.
You shot a squirrel in the backyard or something?
Yeah. My grandparents have a cabin up in northern Michigan, and we would shoot stuff up there all the time. And like my grandpa would usually make us eat it. But there is something else to it. I actually really liked that line you said. It was like when you're underwater, sometimes you forget to breathe, because that actually was a really reminiscent memory of mine. So recently, Tristan, I guess recently is not necessarily recent, but Tristan was hanging out up at my house one time, and we have a pool, and he was showing me some breathwork stuff underwater, like how to relax your body and like hold your breath longer. Granted, so I sucked butt at this. I was like the worst. Never couldn't figure it out. But it reminded me of when I was a kid. My family had a pool, and I remember distinctly there were periods of time where I would go underwater, just hanging out, swimming around, and I never felt like I needed to take a breath. And now I can't say that I was under there for like minutes at a time, because it probably wasn't as long as I remember it being. But I remember being under there and like not thinking about it, but I must have been so relaxed. Yeah, because I remember like I was on there for like longer than I could do now, and I would come up even, and I wouldn't even need to gasp. It would just be like a normal, like even a shallow breath, and it's such a profound feeling. I remember it very distinctly. Like it's insane. So I actually wanted to ask you a quick question about like breathwork techniques and how to like get into stuff like that, because obviously you've been doing really well. So what were some initial steps you took when you were like starting to get into like free diving stuff, like what are some breath techniques that you can practice like that anyone could do? Like I'm a fan of box breathing and stuff like that, but I'd love to
Oh yeah.
expand my horizons.
Yeah, and I'll say first, that's an interesting anecdote that you just shared. I find that I mean I'm assuming that the reason why it may be tougher now is because either maybe you're stressed about something else, or whatever. Like I'll give you this example. When I'm on the boat and I'm spearfishing, like for me that's a total disconnect. But I find that if I have a very intense week and I'm still hanging on to a lot of that stress, I'm not diving anywhere close to how I want to dive. Like my breath holds suck. Like I'm tired. Like and it's because, well, what happens when we're stressed out? The first thing that goes is our breathing. There's a breath work, breathing, whatever you want to call it. It's the most accessible way to influence your physiology because it's what gives you air or oxygen and helps you effectively run away from stressor. Like our stress response is linked to running away. I mean, that's just how we spent most of our evolutionary history. Anyway, there's a really important link between our state of physiological stress and effectively running away from that stressor, because it's just something that we had to do when we were stressed out, when we felt like we were being threatened. We could get away, we could run away. And so nowadays what happens is we still have the same response, but we don't need to run away. But we can still modify the response that is helping us run away to deal with the stress in that moment. So nowadays we get stressed and a couple things happen. Obviously rise in cortisol, we get the fight or flight, our pupils dilate, our hands get sweaty, we get less blood going into the core and more to the extremities to prepare us to get away. Our blood glucose levels rise, so it prepares us, it gives us the fuel, the substrate that we need to get away. So when all this is happening, when you're stressed out nowadays, like how do we survive nowadays? We have to sit on our laptops and get work done, and maybe we'll get a paycheck, right? Well, we still have the same stress response, but we're not moving, and so it's killing us. We get this buildup of inflammation. We get this glucose variability that is hurting us. Our breathing goes. We start mouth breathing, because mouth breathing is the fastest way to breathe. It's like an emergency breathing, but it's not the most effective. It's not the most efficient. Nasal breathing is. And not only is it nasal breathing, but if you nasal breathe naturally, by the way, if you isolate the rest of the body, just your face, nasal breathing already is going to humidify the air better, filter the air better. You're going to get an increase in nitric oxide, which is antibacterial, antimicrobial, antifungal, antiviral. And you start to see more of this, parasympathetic activity starts to calm the nervous system. Then all of a sudden you see the rising and falling of the chest, right? And I'll make the link to spearfishing in a second and freediving in a second. If you're nasal breathing, but you're still getting a rising and falling of the chest, you're using primarily the upper part of the lungs to breathe. But the highest concentration of alveoli, where oxygen exchange occurs in the lungs, is actually in the bottom of the lungs. And so if you are nasal breathing, and by the way, David Jacko Jackson taught me this. He's an Oxygen Advantage master trainer. When you breathe through your nose, don't just breathe through the nose, but breathe into your face rather than up into the nostril. So if you've been to a yoga class, you'll notice that the beginner yogis, when they tell them to take a deep breath, they go, that's like absolutely wrong. You want to take a shallow, slow breath into the face, and it should be so soft, so intentional that you don't see any movement in the shoulders or in the traps, because you're using your belly to breathe. The vagus nerve goes down to the belly. It sits right below the diaphragm. And so when you belly breathe, you get more vagus nerve activity, more parasympathetic activity. And if you start to then extend the exhales on top of that, so you spend about twice as long exhaling versus inhaling. Every exhale, you get slightly more parasympathetic activity. Every inhale is more sympathetic. So when you inhale, you're like preparing your body to run away. And you exhale, you're like telling your body it's okay. So quite literally, I will do like a 4-7-8, I think is a really good one. I forget who coined 4-7-8, but I love 4-7-8 because you're spending 8 seconds exhaling, 4 seconds inhaling. The 7 in between is a 7-second hold. When you hold your breath, it actually helps calm you down slightly. You don't want to hold it too long, and you can actually build up over time. Your CO2 tolerance makes it easier. But when you hold your breath slightly, you get a cardio inhibitory effect. So you actually help slow down the heart rate. So 4-7-8-1 really. So 4-7-8-1 meaning 4 seconds in, 7-second hold, 8 seconds exhaling. You're exhaling so slow, by the way, that if you had a candle right in front of your face, you wouldn't blow it out. And then you hold that for 1 second and then repeat. I typically do this the night before if I'm going to bed and I have a lot on my mind, I'll do this breathwork technique. Before a big meeting or a big podcast or any kind of engagement where I feel maybe a little anxious or just a little too like overactive, when I'm on the boat getting ready to dive, and then in the water, there's a ton of techniques. I'm not going to get into them only because I don't want anyone tuning in or even you guys to take freediving seriously until you take a freediving course that actually teaches you the anatomy and physiology of breathing specific to that environment. Because otherwise, it's an even with the training, it's still objectively an extremely dangerous sport. And so what I just described is a simple breathwork pattern that anybody tuning in can do to immediately modify their stress response and be a more intentional about their decision making, their reaction, anything, because you're regulating the response that is otherwise going to help you run away. When nowadays we don't need to run away, we need to just deal with what we're dealing with effectively. So bring oxygen, bring energy, bring intuition, bring mindfulness in such a way that gives you that effective decision making. And then I'll leave the rest for your freediving class. But yeah, I do a lot of this as I get ready to dive.
That's cool. That's cool. One last thing I'll say, just because I thought of it during the thing when we were talking about why potentially I was able to hold my breath longer in that moment as a child. I think actually, like, I've noticed this a lot, is like, as you get older, I feel like stress builds just because you have more responsibility and life starts to hit you a little bit and the real world becomes like real. And what was interesting is like, I sort of have been trying to do this thing where I'm taking a note from Picasso, who like said it took him a lifetime to learn how to paint like a child. I'm sort of trying to like regain that free mindset of a child, because that's when I remember being the most, and this is probably universal for a lot of people, remember being the most free, the most carefree, the most like the things that you worried about like seem so insignificant now. But I really try to like, I feel like I'm really, I don't know. It's finding that inner child. I feel like that's super important. I think that's like part of the journey for everyone, is like sort of finding that freedom for themselves.
Yeah. Trust me, when
that was
you're
just
in
a
the
side
water,
note. That probably is
when I appreciate sharing that. When you're in the ocean and you're in your wetsuit, maybe you have a gun on you, you don't, your fins, whatever. When you're in that environment and you see how much life there is in there, man, you become a child. You're like a child because you're just like, everything is like the biggest surprise and is just so intensely alive, and it's so unexpected. And I think that honestly helps me get in touch with my childlike self, which I think is, to your point, extremely important.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, anytime I'm kind of in the wilderness, I think you just kind of, well, you're tuning out, like you're saying, it's a complete disconnect, which is why I value things like this, camping, hiking, backpacking, hunting, so heavily, because it's so easy to be distracted, to be, just getting assaulted, for lack of a better word, from all direction in the modern world, in an everyday situation. But when you have this disconnect, you can really take in the environment that's around you. And I think, then you can turn on that inner child, that inner curiosity, that profound movement of how you feel when you see wildlife, when you see just scenery, like whether it's a really cool feature in the water or in the mountains. And that's awesome. But I'm curious, is spearfishing like, is this something that's growing in popularity, decreasing? Like, is there a risk of this completely being wiped out, like in certain areas in a few years? Because I talk a lot about hunting in general with my friends, and, like elk hunting, for example, in Wyoming in 30 to 50 years, who knows what that looks like, and maybe only be for rich people. I mean, we keep getting higher in population and animal population. If we don't change the way we manage our wildlife, our ecosystems, it's not going to be looking really great for hunters in the future. So is this something that you're concerned about? Is there like a large conservation effort surrounding spear fishing as well that's ongoing? Because I feel like that's usually the case with the good hunters, is they're trying to simultaneously be conservationists.
Yeah, that's a great question and a great topic. I'm not an expert in this topic. Frankly, I don't think I'm an expert on any topic, but I'll tell you what, I think from what I understand here in Florida, there's an important community of free divers and spear fishermen. It's relatively small. I mean, I think spearfishing is still pretty small, and I think that uh, the barrier of entry and the barrier of responsibility turns a lot of people off naturally. As cool as it sounds, not everyone's going to do it or want to invest in it. Like, when I'm, by the way, you can do it with minimal gear and spend a couple $100, but when I'm going out with my buddies, we're each wearing like $2,000-$3,000 worth of gear. And sometimes you end up losing some of it because you get sharked or something breaks or it falls off the boat. So I think that's one barrier of entry. Obviously, you either need a boat or you need to know someone with a boat, or you need to get a kayak. But even then, it's still sketchy. So the community is growing. People are getting into it. It's growing very quickly now with social media, since people just want to take cool pictures. And so they want to do whatever it takes to get a cool picture. It is definitely growing. In fact, my dad, he started doing this when he was about 20 years old. And back then it was like it's tiny. Nowadays, I'll go to conventions with him, and well, they're conventions. Like, there's thousands of people there, and they love it. So it is growing a lot, but it's still, compared to other sports, relatively small. I think that, yeah, I mean, the environment is being threatened, not just by the spear fishermen, but by all the boating and the pollution. The good thing is that, and I'm sure that we have this in common with, people like you, who are out there in the wilderness hunting. We are because we have such a deep connection with the environment. We're actually very conscious of things that might pollute it. So, when I'm with my Spearo friends and we see trash in the water, we will always pick it up no matter what, to the extent that sometimes it ends up being like it'll take us hours and hours and hours to get like a fishing net off of a reef. And that'll be like a whole day fishing. Like, we'll come up on like, that's what we'll do that day, So we really take that seriously. Spearfishing is, from what I understand, and again, this is where I'm not an expert. I don't know if this is 100% factual, but from what I understand, from what I know, it's the single most selective and sustainable fish harvesting method that exists. So by definition, it is sustainable, but then, all right, boating around all day long is not very healthy for the environment either. So I guess, look, like, I try to think that I'm conscious of the environment, but I think that right there is the problem, because I can't fully answer the question to the extent of, well, what efforts are being made besides me in terms of policy in, this local area. Like, I think that the most dangerous thing is ignorance. And if you think that you're doing the right thing, but you're killing the environment at the same time, like, that's a real problem. So I will actually, to help answer this question better, maybe the next time that you guys have me on the show, I can give you, I can elaborate further. What I'll do is I'll have an expert on my podcast, and we'll have a conversation about it. Seriously, I mean it. Because as you can tell, it requires the right knowledge to do right by the environment, because you may have the best intention, but if you don't actually have the knowledge, and this goes back to every conversation that we've had, if you have a good intention, but you don't have the right knowledge to go with it, you're not going to get very far. So I need to be educated on this topic. I think that FWC, Florida Wildlife Conservation, does a pretty good job. They are very strict. I've seen people like go to jail and have to pay ridiculous, I mean, honestly, not ridiculous, but impressive fees, because they're just not aware of whatever's in season or what's the size limit. Me and my friends were always super conscious. The best day of the year for us is May 1st, the opening of grouper and hogfish season. So we know the sizes, we know the what's in season, what isn't. We're very aware of that. We only kill what we're going to eat. We only eat what we kill. We get one nice fish a day. That's enough for us. But there's a lot of people that just shoot whatever. They don't give a fuck. And it's a shame. But there's always going to be those people. I think eventually, and hopefully karma bites them in the ass. But I think that there has to be more mainstream education on what the everyday person can do to improve, their relationship to the environment. So, yeah. So
yeah,
no, I want to learn more about.
No, that's a great response. I mean, that's kind of what I was looking for. I'm not an expert on conservation of ruminant animals, wildlife, but I know, like hunting tags pay for like so much, for example, and I'm sure fishing licenses
Yeah, fishing
also
licenses
pay
do,
for.
in fact. Yeah, they do.
Exactly. So it's kind of that. Obviously, you know, if you're trolling fish in the middle of the ocean, like that's like the real problem. Just dragging everything off the bottom of the ground or bottom of the ocean, and yeah, fishing nets, large scale commercial fishing. That's where the real damage is being done. So I would agree with you. I think it's definitely a sustainable way. Obviously, there's, you know, some issues with boating. That's kind of, it is what it is, but that's, you know, we drive cars every day, and
Yeah, you can't
it's
you
just
can't do everything perfect all the
exactly.
time. Um, I imagine I like to imagine that I'm doing the best I can, but I know there's always room for improvement. You know, that's just my ego talking. But I'll tell you what, when we're on the boat with my friends, we're very, very conscious of what we're doing, and we do our best to clean everything up.
And you want to be, you're incentivized to, right? Like this is the whole reason that the incentives are so important, because if you do good by the environment, you know, that's going to be there for you. It's going to be there for maybe your kids, your grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is when you get, you know, people who are just paying a shit ton of money, they're just coming here one time, they don't really care, and they just want a trophy or take a picture. It's, yeah, those incentives are misaligned. And I think that can be said for a lot of types of hunting, but it's really cool because, yeah, not a lot of people are doing this. I think it takes clearly a large amount of skill training and mental fortitude. And so does, you know, other types of hunting, but then other types of hunting, lower barrier to entry. They all have some expense, but yeah, it's cool because it is very decentralized to catch your own food. And that I can align with you very well. Like
Catch
my
and
favorite cooking,
cooking.
yes, that was what I was about to get to. It's like
Yeah.
when you well, not always, because I'm sure you make some ceviche out of that too. Preparing, and I
Well,
make
but
elk
that's cooking. The
tartare.
enzymes cook the flesh.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. You're right.
Yeah, the
But
acidity in the lemons cooks the flesh technically.
sharing that meal with, you know, people you love, I mean, that's like the ultimate thing right there. And
It's
I
the
never
best.
get more excited than when I prepare like elk for family, friends, loved ones. And
I'll
yeah,
tell you
I
a cool story actually, that goes hand in hand with this conservation sustainability effort. So one of the best fish that I've ever shot was a big African pompano, which by the way, you can't get it in stores. You can't get it in restaurants. You have to be at least 3 miles offshore to harvest one. You can only harvest one per person per day. They're very sought after. They're very rare. They're not very easy to hunt. And so I shot an incredible one. And the head on that fish was so big. The head on the fish was so big that we put it in the oven, just the head, took it out, and half of the meat on the head fed the three of us. Like we were full. We were totally full. And most restaurants, what do? They take the fillets out and they discard the head, the tail. We had the spine. The spine of this fish was so big that we ate the bone marrow on it. We ate everything on the head. We got the fins nice and crispy, and we ate them like potato chips. I mean, that might sound nasty to some people, but it was delicious.
just looked it up. It looks crazy. Yeah, that
I mean,
head is
here,
massive.
you guys, that's
Oh yeah,
and I'm not
there
pushing.
you go.
That's sitting on my lap. I'm not pushing it
That's
forward.
huge.
Yeah,
Yeah, but let me show you the head on that fish. And again, I'm sure I have people shitting on me now, going, "Oh, he's showing his trophies, whatever."
well, you ate it,
Well,
so
I ate them. Yeah,
that's awesome.
that's
I don't know
cool.
if you see that, but anyway, yeah, and look, I vacuum seal it, and that'll last me weeks. Like when I took my trip to Mexico, we came back. We had these like soft coolers that we brought on the plane, and it was my buddy and I. We each brought back like 40 pounds of fish vacuum sealed.
Wow.
It lasted us months. No going to and from the store, whatever. The trucks. Not only do you have to go to the store to get the fish, but the trucks bring it in or the planes from wherever else in the world. I mean, we did that one time for like I don't know how many dinners. I can't even count. So that felt pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, like what? Elk. I mean, Tristan, you shot your elk in October last year. I had some in June.
I mean, I have some like right now still.
Yeah.
I've been a
Yeah.
little conservative, but yeah.
Yeah, it can last you a long time. That's funny. I feel actually bad telling my story about killing birds and stuff as a kid, not professionally hunting and conserving the land. I felt bad after I did it every single time, just so the audience
Yeah.
knows. I felt bad, but then I did it again. So I don't know. Does that make me a mass murderer? I don't.
No, I mean, look, there's times where I'm underwater and I have a connection with the fish, like, maybe I'm hunting a particular species, but I'm so calm that it gets so curious and friendly with, and I'm just like, man, do I really like? I'll kill another one, man. Like sometimes you have to let them go.
Yeah.
And there's times where they just for whatever reason it doesn't feel right to kill a particular fish, and sometimes I do feel so, honestly. Some of my friends might make fun of me for this, but there's sometimes where I honestly feel bad. But when you're with the right people, you're there for the right reasons, you're very mindful, you're very calm, you're going to feel very good about whatever you kill. And it's going to feel very good to enjoy that with your friends and family.
Oh, it's definitely better when something goes to a positive use. I mean, other than just like sport per se. So I did actually have one last question here for those of you that have made it this far. You're in for a treat because I think it'll be a good answer. Um, we were talking about fish, and you can watch fish if you want on your phone, on YouTube probably. And earlier, Andre was mentioning phone settings, and the phone settings he has optimized for sleep and dopamine. So I wanted to ask you that question again, really quick, make that harsh
Yes.
transition.
Yeah, I do have to run, but I'm going to take you through the settings that I have on my phone. It's an iPhone, by the way. If you have an Android, I don't know. Maybe I'll make an article for that, or maybe you can go upgrade to an iPhone. I'm just kidding. All right. So a couple things. First of all, instant notifications, they're the end of productivity. So first thing is you go to notification settings. You can do this on any phone and turn off 90% of them, if not more. Like there's no, and by the way, the most important ones that you need to have off are social media notifications. There is no reason why you should care if someone posts something on social media or if someone messaged you or liked your picture. If you're that desperate for attention or to be on top, like you can put that energy somewhere else. Not to shit on people that have those on, but like kind of to shit on them because there's no reason why you need to be distracted. If you're doing something important or something meaningful, there's no reason why social media should be distracting you. And even one little notification could take you out of a flow that could change your fucking life. So turn 90% of them off. The only things that I have on are like, by the way, also, this goes hand in hand with another setting, which is my, what is it called? Do not disturb. My do not disturb is on 24 hours. Only 5 people can actually call me and it'll go through. You can do this on any iPhone, on pretty much any phone nowadays. So it's like my mom, my dad, my brother, my girlfriend, and like one of my business partners. That's it. Everybody else, it silences the first time they have to call me twice to get my attention, or they have to send me a voicemail or a text message. So I have that on. Going back to the notifications, I have my messages off. I have everything except like my parking notifications because I'm in Miami Beach, and if you get towed, you're fucked. So my parking notifications and yeah, like a couple other things. I don't know, random little, I don't know, work things. Anyway, that's the first one. Turn off 90% of them, especially social media. The next thing is if you unlock my phone, I'm gonna unlock it. It's my dog. All right, so I have this. This is my home screen. It's my business QR code, a little like journaling app, my tasks, my notes, and my calendar. If you go right, it's just you have to search. You have to manually search the app that you want to use. What does that mean? Well, let's face it. When we go on our phones, if you have like a crazy busy screen of like full of apps and stuff, you're just gonna get bored. You're gonna start checking everything. You're gonna go. You're gonna be like, why did I even go on my phone? You know, fuck that. That should never happen. You should be intentional with this magic device that gives you access to the entire world. You can do anything you want in your life if you have a phone. Anything you want to be, anything you want to do, you can do it with the phone. So be intentional with it. So I have to manually search the apps that I want to use. All of a sudden, way better. All right, the next biggest thing, this is like the biggest hack of this year for me. Honestly, biggest mental health hack that I've discovered all year. I mean this. I'm not making this up. This is not a paid advertisement. This is genuine. Is this app called One Sec. So this is the home screen there. But I'll give you an example. When I go on Instagram, it has these interventions. It makes me pause. And then when this intervention, sometimes it has me like take my finger and follow the screen. 6 times in the past 24 hours, this says, I don't want to go on Instagram or continue. So all of a sudden you're like, wow, like I'm going on Instagram. You know, it's not like an automatic whatever. Continue. Why are you going on Instagram? Are you bored? Are you angry? Are you taking a shit? are you actually doing it to work? So this has some kind of weird algorithm built into it where it compares your screen time before the app and then during, and it counts the interventions, because when it proposes the question, sometimes you'll deny it and you go, no, like I don't want to go on Instagram. Like, what am I doing? Anyway, it actually tells you how many hours you've saved throughout the week. And in my case, a ridiculous amount of hours, like stupid amount of hours. And let's like, all right, now I can focus on the things that actually matter, right? So those are the top 3 or 4. The next thing would be the night shift. So I have the night shift set up so that as soon as the sun goes down, my phone turns yellow. Even then, there's still some blue wavelength. You want to still wear the blue blockers. I also have another one where if I tap 3 times, I'm clicking both buttons at the same time. The screen goes gray. That's another cool one. But look, the notifications, the home screen, the 1 sec app alone, those are enough to change your life and your relationship with your phone. So I'll leave it at that. I think if everyone does that, they're going to be doing at least 1% more meaningful work, and that alone is enough to change your life. It's enough to change the trajectory of your career, and it's enough to change the world. I think we're spending too much time on our phones doing dumb shit. So hopefully that helps. And with that said,
Amen, brother.
I do have to get going, you guys, but it's been a huge honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, we've gone a bit over. It's perfect timing to wrap up. I think those are impactful phone tips. I just installed that app, even though I have timers, but we can always do better. I love your, thought process behind biologically consistent. I love the positive, just energy you bring. It's contagious. It's always exciting to talk to someone with similar age, similar mindset, making a difference in the space. So we appreciate you, brother. And thanks for coming on. And thanks for everyone for tuning in to another episode of Decentralized Radio. We'll catch you next time.
It's been a huge honor, you guys. You guys are crushing it. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my love, my passion, my energy. I can't thank you enough, and absolutely made this an even more epic day by far. So I can't wait to repost and share with my audience and give you guys a shout out and eventually have you guys on my show so you guys can bring your love, your passion, and your energy to my audience as well.
Hell yeah.